Even if you love cooking as much as I do, I'm sure you've got days where you wish you could just get dinner on the table with no fuss, no muss. On today's episode, I've got 3 mostly make-ahead dishes, a salad, main course, and dessert that with a bit of advanced prep will let you have dinner on the table in no time. I love broccoli salads, but most of them call for the broccoli to be blanched, and I find that that can lead to a soggy salad if you're making it ahead of time. This raw broccoli salad is just crisp and perfect and delicious, so I can't wait to show you how easy it is to make. We're going to start by pickling some red onion. This is something that I do a lot. You'll know that if you've seen the show before. And it just takes some of the sting out of the onion while still giving a nice bit of flavor to your dish. So for the quantity of broccoli we have, that's probably enough thinly sliced onion. We'll get the rest out of the way, and I'm going to cut it into smaller pieces. Put them in a little dish, and then you can add either hot or cold vinegar, white, cider, rice, doesn't matter. I've got a cover on here to keep my vinegar warm, and it's cider vinegar that I've used. Just enough to cover the onions, and then let them sit anywhere from 5 to 15 minutes. So we'll just put those over there. And next up, we're going to make our vinaigrette. I like to do that early on so the flavors have time to blend a little bit. We've got Dijon and lemon juice as the base for our vinaigrette today. And to that, I'm going to add a little bit of garlic, not too much because it is a raw salad. You don't want the garlic to just be overpowering everything else. And my favorite sweetener, maple syrup. This would be a dressing where honey would be really, really delicious as well. We'll give this a shake. Oh, first a little salt and pepper. It's really quite a simple salad, not a lot of different ingredients, and that lets the broccoli really stand out in a great way. Quick little shake. All right. And in case you aren't aware, Dijon in the dressing helps it stay emulsified, or it just kind of hangs together better. So I really like adding it for that reason and also for flavor. And now our olive oil. I have used avocado oil in vinaigrettes quite often, and I really like that too. And one more quick shake. That looks great to me. I usually make double quantities of my vinaigrettes and label what they are and stick them in the fridge, and then I've got them to enjoy for a couple of days of different salads. So now we're going to cut up our broccoli into little small bite-sized pieces. In this case, we won't be using the stem, but don't throw it away. I love to save it and peel it and add it to stir fries or grate it up and put it in a coleslaw. So I can save up a couple of stems, and when I've got 4 or 5 or 6 after 2 weeks, then they're great to use for another purpose. You can also grate them and freeze them, and they could be added to soups. So we're looking for florets about this big. You need them fairly small so that they can absorb the dressing, which will be what works to soften them. Take off one more piece of stem here. I haven't made this salad with broccolini, but I think that would be good. And there's also Brocco flour out there that would be a nice option. So we'll just put our cut broccoli into our bowl. I would suggest not cutting it ahead of time more than, say, 24 hours, because when you cut vegetables, the exposed surfaces do start to deteriorate in the presence of oxygen. So keep that in mind. And if you want to make a smaller salad, you could look for broccoli crowns at the grocery store, which don't have the stem, which you don't need for this recipe anyway. And they're usually small and sold by weight, so you can get exactly what you need and not have to worry about leftover broccoli in the fridge. Kind of in the middle on some of these size-wise, so I'm going to err on the side of small. I find a smaller knife is better for this job because you can get right into the tree part of the broccoli, as we call it in our household, and separate it out into little bits. And I'm putting it right into the serving bowl because I want to see how much I have. Because the broccoli is not going to be cooked, it's not going to shrink down, so I can judge whether or not I've got enough to fill my bowl quite quickly this way. This is also a great salad for summertime because it isn't a mayonnaise-based one, so it's very warm temperature friendly. I think we'll finish up these last 2 big florets. There we go. And we'll just move our board to the side because we don't need it anymore. This just looks like a bowl of health to me. I love broccoli so much. So now we're going to add our pickled onion on top before we dress it, and that way the onion gets to take on some of the dressing, which will counteract the vinegar flavor that it has right now. Put on as much or as little as you like. That's generally the rule of thumb for my salads anyway. If there's toppings I'm particularly excited about, I love to use a lot of them, or as I've mentioned before, serve some of it on the side so then people can add more if it's a topping that they really like. Now our dressing. And I'm going to spoon this on because I want to make sure I don't overwhelm the broccoli. And this way I can really drizzle it over the individual florets because the tree part, as I call it again, the dark green part, really absorbs the dressing. So by targeting it on those areas, I'm going to get the best dressing distribution. Now I'm going to give it a little toss. And as you may have heard me say before, I'm always looking to make sure there's not a puddle in the bottom of the bowl, because that means that there's already ample dressing and there's no need to add any more. And I can see there's just a little light coating in the bottom, so I'm happy with that. Now the trick with this is you want to dress it about 30 minutes before you go to serve it, or even up to a couple of hours. And the reason for that is that the acid in the dressing will start to soften the broccoli, and so it'll still be crisp, but it won't be hard crunchy. So that's just a little tip. And after it's had its time sitting, then you can add the remainder of the toppings. I really love bacon and broccoli. It's just a combination that appeals to me. So I've got some crispy bacon bits here. You can use vegan bacon bits if you prefer. Those are also delicious. On another episode, I'm going to talk about those in more detail. I have some sliced dried apricots. I use these on cheese boards a lot, but they're also a great salad topper, nice and chewy, and they're kind of a nice change from dried cranberries, which are often used on salads. And I think the color of the apricots just looks nice against the broccoli, and it kind of goes harmoniously with the bacon. And last but not least, I've got some sliced toasted almonds. And yes, I did toast these in the microwave. It was about 50 seconds on high power, and they came out perfect with no burnt ones. So as I've said before, great way to toast nuts. So here our raw broccoli salad has come together so easily, and if you prep the ingredients the night or morning before, you can assemble it half an hour before dinner and it'll be perfect.
Up next is a great gateway recipe for those learning to like fish. Tucking it under stuffing and vegetables, the fish absorbs a ton of great flavor. Best of all, you can assemble this dish up to 8 hours before baking.
If you don't like to use your microwave to thaw fish, here's a really easy way to do it instead. Fill a bowl with hot water, place your fish on a plate, even if it's still in its vacuum seal packages. Let it sit for about 10 minutes, change the water, flip them over, and they'll be perfectly thawed in no time at all. For our next Make Ahead Cook Later dish, I'm going to showcase fish. We eat a lot of fish, I really like it, but I recognize that some people either don't know how to cook it or haven't become accustomed to the taste yet. So this one is going to be a dish that I think is going to help your family learn to embrace fish. So we're starting by making stuffing. And I know it sounds like an odd combination, but trust me on this one. Maritimers know their fish, right? And in Newfoundland, one of the most popular dishes in diners is French fries with gravy and dressing, as they call it, or stuffing. Sounds maybe like an odd combo. It is spectacular. You must order it if you go to Newfoundland. So we're going to make our dressing or stuffing by sautéing onions in butter. And this is how easy it is to make stuffing anytime for any purpose. And I'm just going to get some heat going here. There we go. And they just need to soften for, I don't know, I would say about 2 or 3 minutes. And while those are cooking, we're going to add the seasonings to our breadcrumbs. These are old hot dog buns, ends of loaves, whatever. I just throw them in a bag and keep them in the freezer. And then anytime I want to make some stuffing, I have bread that I can just tear apart. So we're going to put in some savory, quite a bit because I really, really like it. That's part of the smell when a turkey is cooking that just smells so good to me. And some salt and pepper. And some sage. And this is the classic recipe that my family has always used. But if your family is a fan of apples and cranberries in their stuffing or a sausage stuffing, it all works in this dish. Just make whatever your favorite stuffing is. So our onions are softening. Now, normally when you cook dressing or stuffing, it's inside the bird if it's a turkey, and that keeps it nice and moist. I often make extra and I'll cook it in a casserole dish or in an aluminum foil packet. So then I need to add a little bit of moisture so the breadcrumbs aren't too dry. You could add chicken or vegetable stock for this. In this case, I'm just going to start with a little bit of water. And I think our onions are probably good now, so turn it off and we will add them to the breadcrumbs. You could definitely use a non-dairy butter if that's appealing to you. I wouldn't recommend using oil because I think it would taste literally too oily. Give it a stir, and then your stuffing is ready. So we'll just set that aside for the moment. Now we've got an oven-safe dish, and it's got a little bit of vegetable oil in the bottom so that the fish doesn't stick to it. And we're going to put the fish fillets that we thawed over hot water in the bottom. I'm just making enough for 2 people. You can obviously use more fish and a bigger dish if you're making it for a larger group. And just try to sort of fill the bottom as best as you can. I'm pretty happy with that. And we're also going to get some tomatoes and zucchini to layer on top. All right, I've got my tomato and zucchini now, so I'm just going to get those ready. They're going to be the top layers of our dish because they're kind of the most photogenic, we'll say. So you want to slice them fairly thinly so they'll cook quickly. Fish does not take that long to bake. It depends on the thickness of it, of course, but you don't want to overcook it. However, this dish is great because the fish is so insulated by all the things on top of it that it actually doesn't get dried out. So even if you go beyond the recommended finished temperature of about 155 to 160 Fahrenheit, it's still going to taste delicious. So we've got our zucchini and now some tomato slices. And again, we're trying to do these fairly thinly. And you want just enough to cover the top of the dish with a little bit of overlap because the vegetables will shrink as they cook. So we're going to spoon the stuffing over the fish, and you want to cover it completely so we get that insulation that I talked about a moment ago. And that way, as I said, the fish can't dry out. I may not need all this stuffing, so I'll probably save it and add it to a chicken sandwich. It'll need to get baked, of course, for that purpose. I think we'll just add it all. Why not? My kids have said in the past that stuffing is the best part of a turkey dinner, so in their honor, we'll add a bit more. And it does shrink down a lot, as do the vegetables and fish, so the dish won't be over full when it's cooked. All right, so now we layer the vegetables. And as I said, you just want to lay them on top. A little overlap's okay. When it comes time to serve this dish, really the sky's the limit. If your family likes tartar sauce, that would be great. If you like just a squeeze of lemon, that's okay too. I know people who sometimes just put a sprinkle of malt or cider vinegar on their fish, and that's great as well. All right, and I'm going to press it down, there we go, to make room for our tomatoes. Perfect. All right, so to this point, you can cover your dish, put it in the fridge for up to 8 to 10 hours, and then before dinner, take it out of the fridge. It bakes for about a half an hour at either 375 to 400, depending on the thickness of your fish. And when it comes out of the oven, as I promised, it does shrink down, but it just looks so delicious. I don't know if you can see the layers there with the fish and the stuffing and then the vegetables. And to finish it off, I'll just move this aside. I'm going to chop a little parsley just to brighten up the surface of the dish. And I do think that even if you have reluctant fish eaters in your family, you may want to give this a try. Go a little bit more. If you had fresh sage available to you in your garden, you could fry some sage leaves and put it on top if you wanted to get all fancy. Or you could also sliver them very, very, very small and put them on top. All right, put our parsley on for a nice hit of color. There we go. And now we've got our before and after fish fillets with stuffing.
Up next, I'm going to show you an easy-to-make dessert that incorporates several things we've been told often are good for us: dark chocolate, chili powder, and cinnamon, topped off with healthy granola for a burst of fiber, crunch, and flavor.
This is one of my favorite easy desserts, and it also happens to be great for gifting. So sometimes I make a double batch, and if I owe favors in the neighborhood, everybody's getting dark chocolate granola bark. Really easy to make. You can melt the chocolate chips in the microwave, but I like doing it double boiler style over a pot. Just make sure the bottom of your bowl doesn't touch the water that's in the pot, and that's just at a simmer. Add chocolate chips. I like dark chocolate chips. Them all in there, and they're going to start to melt fairly quickly. I like to add just a scant teaspoon of vegetable oil. It helps the chocolate chips melt and spread more smoothly and makes for a nice glossy bark at the end. People have asked me if this is something you could make with white chocolate. If you buy proper white melting chocolate, you can, but white chocolate chips are exceedingly difficult to melt, so I wouldn't recommend proceeding with them. You could maybe mix a few in with the chocolate, but I would go chocolate primarily for this. The same would apply to peanut butter chips. If you like those, you could mix some in. So it's already starting to melt on the bottom of our bowl. Such a quick and easy thing. And we're going to have some great add-ins and add-ons for this. Just give that a little more heat. We're going to top our melted chocolate, which we will pour out onto this parchment-lined tray once it's fully melted, with some sweetened dried cranberries chopped up. You could use raisins if you prefer. You could skip this. And then I've got some of my homemade granola here, which has sunflower seeds and almonds and pepitas or green pumpkin seeds in it. If your granola already has cranberries, you could skip that step. Okay, we're getting some great melting action here. It only takes usually less than 5 minutes to melt chocolate in this double boiler style. I've got so much heat I can even turn the burner off now because the water, of course, will continue to steam away. And just stir it fairly continuously. You want to get the chocolate up off the bottom because that's where the bulk of the heat is. And you'll see it just getting smoother and smoother as you stir. You might need to scrape off your scraper if there's chips adhering to that. I do find a silicone or a rubber scraper is the best for this, but of course you can use a spoon if that's what you've got on hand. Now that the chocolate's nearly melted, we're going to do our add-ins. So I have some chipotle chili powder for just a nice little kick. If you have eaten Mexican food, you know that chili and chocolate is a real favorite combination there. I've also got some cinnamon because chocolate and cinnamon play very nicely together. And I'm going to save my coarse salt for a topping. But you could mix it in if you like salty chocolate, which I happen to love. So keep stirring until there are no more lumps of chocolate chips visible. And you know what? If you miss one or two, it really doesn't matter. With all the things we're putting on top of the bark, no one will ever see it. Okay, I think we're there. Now when you pull your bowl out, just make sure that it's not dripping because you don't want it to drip onto your pan. That can discolor your chocolate. And then pour it kind of down the middle. You'll spread it out with your scraper later, so it doesn't matter if it's not perfectly even. Oops, I see I got some water there. I'm going to turn my paper over. And it looks really thick, but as I said, you'll be spreading it. And you want to spread it thin enough that you can crack it into pieces. That's kind of the purpose of a chocolate bark. If you wanted to make a chocolate peppermint combo, you could always add some peppermint oil. And now I'm just going to spread it reasonably uniformly. Again, doesn't have to be perfect. This is not scientific and definitely not professional chocolate making. Flatten down your parchment paper if you need it. Sometimes people say to make chocolate bark on foil, but I find parchment, it's so much easier because you can just pick it off the parchment when it's cooled and ready to be broken into pieces. All right. So now I'm going to do the cranberries, and I like to do this by hand rather than scattering them directly out of the bowl so that you can control the distribution more evenly. It might be tempting to add a whole lot of toppings, but if you add in too many, they start to fall off the bark. So I try to kind of hit the sweet spot in the middle of just enough toppings. Remember that each piece is going to be an inch or two in size, so the likelihood that someone will get a little bit of everything is quite good. And I think I'll do the salt next because the granola looks so nice on top. Just a few flakes. Coarse salt is ideal. If you have fleur de sel in your pantry or Maldon salt, those are really great for this application. You want to feel the salt crystal on your tongue, but not have it be so large that it's crunchy. There we go. And the granola. And again, I'm going to do this by hand so that it's fairly even. Oh, I realize this batch has coconut in it as well, so that's going to be excellent with the chocolate. So you want to be able to still see the chocolate underneath, but have a pretty good coating. And because our chocolate is still so warm, the granola is going to stick to it. So that means you have to work kind of quickly, have everything all ready for when the chocolate is melted. If you wait too long, the surface of the chocolate will start to cool, and then the granola won't stick as nicely. If you're using a commercial granola, if it's quite clumpy, you'll want to break up the clumps beforehand. So maybe put some in a bowl and take a look at it, and that way you'll have a nice fine layer like we do here. Once you've prepared this, it needs to sit and cool down. I usually leave it at room temperature for about a half an hour and then tuck it in the fridge. And that's necessary so that you can break it. And a big important tip, I have very warm hands all the time, so I run my hands under very, very cold water and dry them before I go to break the bark. And here is a bowl of the finished bark that's been broken into pieces. And if that's not just the most tempting, quick, easy make-ahead dessert, I don't know what is. I find there's something so relaxing about knowing a meal is mostly sorted ahead of time, and then I can get on with the other tasks in my day. With this meal, you can make the broccoli salad the night before, the fish fillets can be prepped and all ready to pop in the oven right before dinner, and of course the spicy chocolate bark is a dessert that's pretty and also pretty healthy.